and Hull City have already got enough to deal with on the pitch. But Hull midfielder Jake Livermore tests positive for cocaine. From the 15th of May 2015, Hull City midfielder Jake Livermore has tested positive for cocaine and will not play again for Hull City this season. They only had 2 more games at that point anyway. But Livermore, who's made 1 appearance for England, failed a post-match drug test after Hull's 2-0 win over Crystal Palace on April 15th. And although he played in the 1-0 defeat by Burnley last weekend, the club had no choice but to ban him once they were informed of the test result. A club statement released on Friday evening said, following suspension by the FA, the club has subsequently suspended Jake Livermore. Where are we going next on that one? Pending further investigations to be made by the FA and our own internal disciplinary procedures. The club is unable to make any further comment during this process. The Football Association, under whose auspices Livermore was tested, later issued its own brief response. In line with its anti-doping regulations, the FA can confirm it has issued a provisional suspension to a participant following a positive test for a prohibited substance. The word prohibited always reminds me, Jesse, I know you'll get this one, always reminds me of WWF, Breakdown 98 in your house. By the way, big shout out to the Attitude Era podcast. I've been listening to that all week. Prohibited. But anyway, sticking on the serious note, the FA will make no...
Oh, you going with right to censor there?
No, Vince McMahon.
Well, that too,
man, in the building, prohibited. You are absolutely prohibited. But the FA will make no further comment until it's completed its investigations into the matter. The player who cost $8 million last summer when he signed for Tottenham Hotspur is likely to be banned for at least 6 months if the test results are confirmed, but he could also be sacked by Hull for gross misconduct. That would allow him to join another club as a free agent once he served his ban, but Hull may decide to put him on the transfer list as his behaviour has appalled both manager Steve Bruce and owner Assem Alam. There is also a chance Hull will take legal action against him. Livermore is the highest profile player to be banned for taking cocaine since Chelsea striker Adrian Mutu, who is ordered to pay more than £14 million in compensation to the London club. I think it was a case of where Juventus ended up footing the bill for that. We'll come back to that. Mutu was banned by the FA and sacked by Chelsea after failing a drug test in 2004, resulting in a long legal battle as both sides sought compensation. However, the Court of Arbitration for Sport upheld an early FIFA verdict in favour of Chelsea after an appeal by the Romanian was rejected. No decision has been made on Livermore's long-term future at this stage, as everyone is trying to focus on the increasingly perilous relegation battle, but if Hull can get their money back, they will be sorely tempted to follow Chelsea's example. Now, the FA, of course, conducts drug testing both in competition and out of competition, which can mean at training sessions and players' home addresses. Players are also selected randomly after games by drug testers. However, cocaine is thought to be difficult to detect as it is flushed out of the body quickly. Now, sticking with this, Jose Baxter, Sheffield United suspend forward after drugs test. This is the day after, 16th of May 2015. League One side Sheffield United have suspended forward Jose Baxter after he failed an out-of-competition Football Association drugs test. A statement on the Blaze website said traces of a banned substance were found when Baxter underwent testing. The player has informed the club that he engaged in no wrongdoing involving any banned substance, it added. The 23-year-old scored 13 goals in 48 league and cup games for United during the 2014-2015 campaign. The news comes only one day after Hull City midfielder Jake Livermore was suspended by the FA and also Hull City as well. Now, Aaron McCary, Wolves goalkeeper, fails his drug test from the 17th of May 2015. So all of these are in the space of like 2-3 days of each other, which is absolutely insane. But yeah, Wolves goalkeeper Aaron McCary has been suspended by the club after he failed an out-of-competition Football Association drug test. The 23-year-old Irishman tested positive for a non-performance enhancing drug. The club is extremely disappointed and concerned that one of his players has failed a drug test, said Wolves in a statement. McCary denies deliberately taking any banned substance. The Republic of Ireland under-21 international joined Wolves in 2010 but has made just 5 appearances for the club. Now, little more to this story actually from the 17th of May as well. Gordon Taylor, PFA chief, calls for better drug education for players. From May 17th, 2015, footballers taking recreational drugs do not appreciate the consequences for their careers and families, says Players Union Chief Gordon Taylor. He also called for better drug education after 3 players tested positive for banned substances. Hull's Jake Livermore, Wolves goalkeeper Aaron McCary, and Sheffield United forward Jose Baxter have all been suspended as their clubs, as we've just mentioned. The educational regulations need to be enhanced, clearly, Taylor said. They probably have never appreciated the seriousness of what happened, he told BBC Radio 5 Live Sports Week programme. The PFA chief executive said all 3 suspensions follow positive tests for social and recreational drugs such as cocaine and ecstasy, as opposed to performance-enhancing drugs. He said he was concerned that players who had never considered using performance-enhancing drugs did not understand the damage social drugs could do to their careers. We certainly can't relax now, he said. We have to look at the education and advisory service. The Football Association's anti-doping regulations prohibit players from taking social drugs at any time. Footballers found guilty of taking the drugs recreationally can be banned for up to 6 months, but players who read positive for social drugs during a post-match test could receive a suspension of up to 2 years. So there's the potential there for Livermore. They probably do not appreciate the consequences, not just for them and their careers, but their families, Taylor said. There were 4 positive tests last season from the 1,604 carried out, but Taylor said drug testing had become more rigorous this year, with players now tested on average 3 times a season. Gezzie Fizzle, would you like to jump in with your opinion on this first before I have mine?
Yeah, I mean, like, the biggest thing for me to start with is that in professional sport, players failing drugs tests is not something new.
Of course not.
This is something that happens on a regular basis. The thing that surprises me, though, is they're non-performance enhancing drugs. I mean, one of the things, that the NFL are known to be cracking down on and have cracked down on in recent years, are tests for performance enhancing drugs. So they've cracked down on that. They've got a very strong stance on marijuana in terms of their drug policy. There haven't been many prominent cases of cocaine use in recent seasons. But, I think for me, the thing is, it goes back to what you're saying in regards of what's required, right? As a professional to continue to do the job of a professional footballer. That means that there are certain things in social circles that you have to forego. And one of them, the recreational drugs. If you want to take recreational drugs on a regular basis, now I'm not advocating that at all, but if you did, don't be a professional footballer. It really is as simple as that. And right about now, I think those 3 players that have failed drugs test recently, they've let their clubs down, they've let the fans down, they've let themselves down, and all the other people that helped them get to where they are. And it really is a matter of how the clubs and the FA decides to handle this. I think there's a great learning opportunity here in terms of re-educating players on the importance of staying away from drugs, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, I also think that, there has to be a precedent set here where we can actually say, well, look, if you do this, this is what happens. As to coin a phrase of one of your straight shooting one, it's a matter of punishing uniformly in the draconian fashion. For me personally.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you, to be perfectly frank, because at the end of the day, it's one of them ones where you can't let this look like you can't let this look like people can get away with it, because obviously we've seen it in the past. This is not the first time. You look at guys like Paul Merson. He got off pretty bloody lightly, to be perfectly honest. And it's a case of, all right, looking at the bans that can be levied for failing an out of competition drugs test. I don't know. It seems a little lenient. I mean, footballers found guilty of taking the drugs recreationally can be banned for up to 6 months. But then you look at, say, I'm going to bring up this example, Rio Ferdinand. He missed a drug test.
Yeah, that was exactly where I was going to go.
And he got banned for 9 months. So if you're getting banned for 9 months just for missing a drugs test, then for failing one, surely the punishment should be double, if not triple. So even if I mean, it's a weird one. Football is guilty of taking the drugs recreationally, can be banned for up to 6 months. But then Rio Ferdinand got banned for 9 months for missing a test. That doesn't even make sense. That legitimately doesn't make sense. And players who read positive for social drugs during a post-match test could receive a suspension of up to 2 years. But as said, it's a case of Rio Ferdinand didn't fail a test. He missed it. So he got very, very harshly dealt with. But it's a case of, as I said, you look at Paul Merson. He got away very, 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 very lightly. I can't even remember what he got. So I don't like this whole incongruity or this whole inconsistency, it must be said, with punishments. It's like these punishments, as Jesse quoted me, they need to be, but people need to be punished uniformly and in a draconian fashion. I think it's one of them ones. If you're tested positive for social drugs or performance enhancing drugs during a post-match test, bun 2 years. I'm looking at 3-4. Because that is a harsh punishment, and it will make sure that you are careful with what you do. And if you're found guilty of taking drugs recreationally, bun 6 months. I'm looking at 1.5 to 2 years for that. Because at the end of the day, you're still taking drugs. Whether it's like traces in your system on a post-match thing, or whether it's guilty in the post-match or whether it's recreationally, the fact is you're still doing it. So I don't think there should be that much difference between the punishments. Now, there are obviously precedents in other sports, such as professional wrestling with drug testing and that kind of thing, with the WWE's wellness policy. But even that is riddled with holes because they do the 3 strikes and you're out. You fail one, you get suspended for 30 days. You fail 2, you get suspended for 60 days. And for a 3rd infringement, you get fired. So, but then it's one of them ones where we've seen guys get around that because of who they are. Randy Orton being one of the examples, getting around it because of who he is. He's one of their biggest stars. They're not going to sack him outright. And I think it's disgraceful that, in theory, it's kind of who you are is going to save you. I personally don't like that. If you want to send a message that you're going to stamp out drugs and you're going to stamp out drug abuse, you need to be very, very forthright and firm in the way you do it. You need to be firm like silicone snavenses. It's one of them ones. The fact of the matter is that. So it's an interesting one. Just coming onto Twitter. Just ever so briefly. We've got at Hutch tweeting, which is actually Chris Hutchinson, one of our first ever Pitch Talk bloggers, and the Everton supporter as well. It was a case of the question was asked, Jake Livermore, Jose Baxter and Aaron McCary have all failed drug tests. Should their clubs cut ties with them? Personally, I believe they should, but it's one of them ones. But Chris Hutchinson has said Arsenal didn't with Paul Merson in 94, Everton did with Bill Kenny in 1993. Seems it's more of a case of who you are. Baxter is just a little bootle scally anyway. With his talent as a teen, he could have been a star, but he's a moron. Mutu at Chelsea is the best example. Chelsea sued him. So, it's one of them ones. They sacked, as we mentioned, they sacked Mutu and then sued him for compensation because obviously they had to pay the guy. So it's one of them ones where you look at certain examples of incongruities and inconsistencies with the punishments. It's just very, very weird. I personally think that, boy, it's one of them ones. Whole city it should be a case of, right, you know what, yeah, you tested positive for this bugger, we can't afford this, because no club can afford PR that bad. And we've seen a few clubs go through the ringer in terms of bad PR over the last few years whilst we've been doing PT shows. So, I mean, also it's a case of, as Gordon Taylor said, the effect on the families and that. The effect on the families, the effect on the careers. You're always going to be tainted with this kind of thing. That's always going to be the thing. I mean, the clubs. I think it's one of them ones where the clubs have basically acted in the only way they really can immediately, so they're not doing the knee-jerk thing. But it is a case of where I think some people are going to look at, right, so what particular substance were they banned for, and they're going to make decisions based on that. But at the end of the day, I mean, with Livermore, he's an important player to Hull, and they need him. So are they really going to get rid of him? And therein is one of the major problems, because that's always going to be the question that teams are going to ask themselves before asking the moral question. Well, he's failed a drugs test, we should get rid of him. So, I mean, you look at Chelsea with the Mutu thing. Chelsea could afford to sack Adrian Mutu at that time because of the money they've got, the resources they've got, or they had at that time. It was a case of they could afford to sack him. So it's one of them ones. But I'm wondering if any of our Skypers want to jump in on Baxter, Livermore, and also McCary as well, because I know.
Yeah, and generally just join the debate. Like, what do you think should be done? Should the clubs cut ties, or should they, create an environment where there's a support network, right, and actually try to rehabilitate the player?
Yeah.
So to give some kind of context, again, I throw over to the NFL, where the likes of superstar wide receiver Des Bryant, who plays for the Dallas Cowboys, right? He had lots of issues, some of them with domestic violence, others with drugs and financial issues and everything else, okay? But they got the right people in place, and now he's arguably one of the best wide receivers in the entire NFL at the moment, even though it pains me to say that as a New York Giants fan. So it is possible if you go and put the right people around these players to support them and hopefully rehabilitate them and have them, continue to contribute to the club and the community.
Yeah.
But in this particular case, as you say, what do you do? Now, in the case of Jake Livermore, I think, his is a very interesting case, and I think the fee that Hull paid for him was about, $7 million from Tottenham?
I think it was 8, yeah, 8.
7-8 million from Tottenham, right? And he is an integral part of a lot of what they do. So, the decision to just cut bait with him will not be one that's taken lightly because of all of that. And, similar to what Hutch was saying, can they actually do a Chelsea, essentially, after cutting bait with him and sue him for, money's owed? Because essentially, look, they're going to need to recoup some of that transfer fee, and the best place to get that from would be him and his agent. And in wages, it's like, well, look, you've gone and broken the terms of your contract. You've brought the club into disrepute, brought negative publicity, and so on and so forth. So we want our money back.
But it's one of them was. But I think it's one of them was. I mean, I legitimately do think it kind of depends on. It almost does depend on the offence. I mean, I think the WWE's wellness policy with the 3 strikes and you're out is an interesting one because it does give a chance to rehabilitate. But I think it's one of them ones. If the clubs don't cut ties and they suspend the player, it's a case of that ban has then got to be draconian, and there's got to be some rehabilitation put in there. I mean, it might actually from what Gordon Taylor was saying in terms of education needs to be better in terms of drug policies, drug abuse, and that kind of thing. I do agree with him on that, which is why it may end up that you almost get the 3 strikes and you're out rule, similar to the WWE's wellness policy, where one, you get banned. I mean, 30 days is lenient, 60 days is lenient too, but it's one of them ones. But at the end of the day, I think, but then part of me would side with the WWE's wellness policy and think, you know what, this could work in football with the drug issue, because at the end of the day, obviously Gordon Taylor's saying better drug education. At least you'd get 2 chances to rehab before you get kicked out. But then at the same time, there are loopholes built within that, which is why I mentioned Randy Orton specifically, because I think he failed the wellness policy twice. So it was one of them ones, but obviously because of who he was in the company and his standing in the company, kind of, well, don't do it again. But I don't know. I mean, players can turn around, and certain sports stars, as you mentioned, that wide receiver. I will throw another example in there. Scott Hall ended up turning his life around. It took a long time and a lot of rehab, and a bit of DDP yoga as well. Big shout out to Diamond Dallas Page. But it's a case of, I mean, rehabilitation is key. But I think it's one of them. Was if it's a first offence, I don't think there should be leniency with the punishment. I don't think a first offence means leniency with the punishment. And I said there are inconsistencies that need to be ironed out within the punishments themselves, which is why I brought up the Rio Ferdinand example.
But I also pose the question to you now and to everybody else, because I know that there's a little bit of discussion in the Skype chat about this as well. In that, should the FA take the power away from the clubs and just intervene outright and say, well, look, as players, you've gone and you've violated our drug policy, so automatically you cannot represent your club and you have to stay away from all football for however long and go through a mandatory rehabilitation program.
I heard that. I'll go with that. I mean, Kieran Riley, do you want to jump in first? Kieran, you there? All right, we might have to come back. To Kieran. But Kieran did mention Dave Edwards has come to McCary's defence. Midfielder Dave Edwards saying that Wolves teammate Aaron McCary is a model pro after failing the drug test. So it's an interesting one. But I mean, he's also said, where was it? I think it was McCary. Oh no, that's something completely different. But I mean, Tom Wood, you've had quite an interesting view in the Skype chat. Would you like to articulate that in relation to this story? Tom, did you want to say your view that you put in the Skype chat?
You can read it if you want.
All right. Well, it's one of them was Tom mentioned in the Skype chat. To be honest, I think all footballers who get in trouble outside of the football side of it should be kicked out of the club they're playing for, or maybe altogether. I mean,
I think that's a very interesting view. I mean, in terms of punishing uniformly and in the draconian fashion, I mean, well, there you have it. I think if that's mandated by the FA, as I say, you'll have a lot more professional footballers who, happen to engage in drugs, bear the consequences. So that whole lifestyle they're able to afford to do this on a regular basis, that goes right out the window straight away.
Yeah. See, this is the thing though, with kind of drugs and recreational drugs and all that, it's clearly not limited to football. I mean, you could look at all facets of entertainment, sport to an extent, sports entertainment as well, and look at that kind of thing happening. So it's an odd one. I mean, Mike Harneman, you had an interesting view in the Skype chat as well. Would you like to tell us that and tell the world?
Yeah, first of all, how are we all doing? Is everyone all right?
All good, man. Fantastic, man. Good. How about you, man?
Yeah, not too bad. My view was basically that I'm kind of agreeing with Woody, to be fair, on the majority of it. I think it should be basically, obviously, if it's repeat offenders, it should be guaranteed kick out straight away. But I think that's kick out of the club and kick out of the game. That's the way that I see it. Because at the moment, the way that I'm looking at it is these players obviously have too much time on their hands, too much money, and don't know what to do with the money that they're earning. So they're just going out buying drugs and using it for whatever else. So basically, what I'm thinking is like the lower leagues could be ended up crawling with players that have had issues or having issues at the time, which is obviously it's not good for the lower leagues. But they need to take action at all levels. Basically, is what I'm trying to say. And on Gezzie's point as well, I think the FA should intervene, but only if the clubs are not doing the jobs properly. It has to be down to the club first of all. But then the FA should have the power to intervene if they're overlooking the clubs, like what the club are doing, and the club are not doing it right. If you know what I'm saying.
No, I agree
I hear
with
that, and I think that's a very interesting point. So, I suppose ideally what would happen is there'd be drug policy guidelines from the FA given to all the clubs that in general terms they have to adhere to, and if they're not enforcing those guidelines, then they come in with an intervention. But then for me, my question to you, Mike, would be if a club fails to adhere to that because one of their players ends up failing a drug test, does that mean that the club also get docked points? Are they punished in another way in terms of transfer embargoes? Like, what else? What other additional punishment would there be? Because if the club's failing, then the club has to be punished as well.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I'd go down the points route because if you look at the Premier League, for example, look how close it is towards the bottom. If there's a team struggling, like Leicester, for example, Newcastle, like the whole Sunderland, and one of their players does it, they have to basically dock them points. That's the way that I see it. Because obviously it could be a player that, he could be a striker that wins them the game, or a keeper that makes a match-winning save. It could be anything. So it has to be points for me.
And I think that's a very interesting route to go.
I
also think that, as I say, there is a massive education and re-education opportunity here to explain, to footballers, not just in the top leagues, we're talking about all the way down, that, drug use will not help you. It will not help you, not in the professional ranks. And if you're, at a club that is semi-pro or Sunday league, and you're trying to find your way back to being a pro, it's not going to help you there either.
But you know what? The thing, there's another interesting view that Tom Wood has put in. All footballers should have monthly drug tests, or maybe a counsellor to support them through the situation they're going through. I think in terms of what you were saying, in terms of a rehabilitation opportunity, that's an interesting one. And I do agree with Mike's point about the FA shouldn't necessarily jump straight in. It should be a case of let's see what the clubs do first, then let's see what the FA can step in if they're not doing the job properly. And the reason why I agree on that point is because if the FA steams straight in, then they could leave themselves open to legal action. Because it's like, because the clubs could turn around and say, well, we paid this much and you've taken the power away from us. We were going to suspend him for a certain amount of time, or a certain amount of time adhering to your rules. And it's one of them was, you haven't given us a chance to sort this out. So then the FA, I think, would be smart enough in that regard to not leave themselves too open to legal action. It's kind of, see, this is the thing with football being so money orientated. A lot of these things end up becoming legal issues. So you got the clubs thinking about trying to recoup their losses, but also at the same time they're looking at on the pitch as well. It's like, oh, this player's a big player for us. But then, in theory, a drug violation should be black and white. But there's a lot of shades of grey in it. This is what makes it actually a very, very, very complex kind of topic. Where it's not, I don't think it's as simple as cut ties and get rid.
No, it's not. And especially when, as I say, if you're talking about a prominent player in a side, that has obviously contributed a lot to the team. That's where, we have even more shades of grey. I don't know if it's 50 or more, but we definitely have a few shades of grey there. In that, if the player is a prominent player, it's a matter of, well, look, in terms of putting the best possible product out on the field, in terms of giving the team the best possible chance to win, you need that player. I mean, let's look at Diego Maradona in his pomp, right? He was, an amazing footballer, but at the same time, did the drugs help? Probably, but then at the same time, as I say, when you're looking at a mercurial talent like that, who was so important, to all of his clubs and his national team, you're saying to yourself, well, apart from when it all came to a head, around about 94, right, for the 94 World Cup, if my memory serves me correctly.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Right? It was like, well, look, how do you take him out of the team? You don't. Is the answer. You don't. If you want to win, he's in the team. So, and this is the challenge with it being a prominent player. If it's a prominent player and an important player to the team, it's a matter of, well, are you willing to sacrifice your best possible chance to win with him in the team in order to send a message and help the player get the help that they need, or are you just focused on wanting to win?
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. That's a good point. And it's quite fun. I mean, I said it's not even necessarily black and white. I mean, just discussing it with you guys now, it's just kind of like, do you cut ties? Do you not? Do you do this? Do you do that? There's so many different areas. I mean, Russ Vernon, did you want to jump in on this on Livermore, McCary, and excuse me, sorry, Livermore, McCary, and Baxter as well?
Yeah, I did, Lim, because first and foremost, I want to tell the Baxter one, because I've actually got the Sheffield United coach, Jim Phipps, as a friend on Facebook, and I was talking to him when the club made that announcement on their website by Jose Baxter. He's actually said, while the disciplinary hearings being done by the FA and the Football League and everything, he's going to be suspended from all activity, meaning training as well. He's not allowed to train with his teammates when they return to pre-season training. And they've said if once the hearing's been done and if he gets found guilty of using a banned substance, he's likely to be banned by the club for a year, maybe a year and a half, from playing for. That's involving training and everything, so he'll have to go and keep himself fit somewhere else. And I was also, when I heard about McCary failing a drugs test, when I saw the drugs test, when I saw the statement on the Wolves website, first person I messaged about that was Kieran, being a Wolves fan, and he's the third choice goalkeeper there. On Baxter and McCary, I've done an actual poll on my website about should they be able to play football again, and on the Jose Baxter one, I've a total of 10 votes. 6 people have said Baxter shouldn't play football again, 4 have said yes. And over with the McCary one, I've done the same one again, should he play football again. 7 have said yes, 5 have said no. So I'll send you those articles so you can have a vote yourselves on those 2 guys, and everyone in the chat, and you can post them out on Twitter and Facebook to get your fans involved as well, Liam, if you want after the show. And I think with Livermore, I was talking to Sam Greenham about this. Me and him reckon he could end up dropping down to as low as the conference, Livermore, to play down there until while he builds his reputation back up. Because I think we were both thinking if he plays for all again next season, especially for Goodine, he's going to be getting loads of use from the team, the fans in the Championship, of opposite players, opposite teams, and including his own fans as well, all fans as well. So I think they should all drop down to at least the conference, play the trade down there for a bit, and then move up, then work their way back up the leagues again, back to the likes of Wolves and Sheffield United and all cities. And I was speaking to one of the reporters who were working with the other week from one of our local papers about it earlier today, and he was saying he spoke to the reporter for Sheffield United for his paper that he works for, and they're all thinking in the office there that Baxter will not play football again for anyone And I think if that's the case, it's the right decision.
You know what? Yeah, I want to jump in on that because it's a case of I mean what Mike Harneman said in the Skype chat won't be long till the lower leagues such as the conference and the conference north, south, etc., are all players who have had issues. That's why I can't say I agree with you in terms of Mike's just put that that's Mike Harneman. You know what? Articulate it yourself because you've just summed up what I'm about to say.
Yeah, basically, my point was we don't want the lower leagues to be filled with druggies. The lower leagues will lose the reputations that they've gained, and we're looking to improve the game in the country, Russ, not make it worse.
I totally agree with that sentiment because it's a case of if you get just nothing but people with issues and stuff like that, it ends up devaluing that particular league. Because then there's always going to be doubts. Oh, is that league on the up and up? Oh, are they doing that? Are they doing that? And their drug testing, they may not be able to afford as stringent drug testing. So it might. And Gezzie Fizzle, I know you'll remember this example. The British Bulldog in the WWF in 1997. I don't know if you've seen the Kayfabe commentaries release. Big shout out to Kayfabe commentaries at Kayfabe comment on Twitter. I don't know if you've seen the timeline of 1997 with Jim Cornette, the Kayfabe commentaries release, but him and Sean Oliver talk about the British Bulldog and the issues that he had with drugs and that kind of stuff. And I say this with all due respect, rest in peace to Davey Boy Smith, the British Bulldog. And it was a case of obviously in the WWF he had family around him, he was able to manage his issues somewhat and still perform. But when he went to WCW, it was apparently WCW was very fragmented. It was basically anarchy rules backstage and very cliquish. Obviously Bret Hart had his issues. Jim Neidhart obviously had his issues too. Ed to the Z Daddy, in the words of the Iron Sheik, in terms of his drug-related issues. Rest in peace to Jim the Anvil Neidhart as well. So obviously you're going from an environment where drug testing was supposed to be quite stringent in the WWF in the mid to late 90s, where guys such as Kevin Nash, X-Pac have said that they were P tested and that kind of thing quite often. But then it's one of them ones where you also look at you also look at this in regards to football. You could end up having players dropping down to conference level, and because the drug testing may not be as stringent because they haven't got the money to, it could exacerbate their problems because they know they'd be able to get away with a lot more. So this is where rehabilitation and re-education and basically reorientation becomes extremely important, in my personal opinion.
I totally agree. I have to say Mike hit the nail on the head where we say, right, okay, these players may have to drop down leagues or leave football all entirely while they get rehabilitated. But, the idea of, these prominent players, and I say prominent because they're in higher leagues, potentially cascading down to the lower leagues to non-league level, etc., is not a very good idea. Just because, and I'm not saying that, someone can't be rehabilitated and reformed. Of course they can. But at the same time, in terms of the potential influence of someone like that who hasn't been rehabilitated and hasn't been reformed, on the game where, as Mike's already duly pointed out, has rebuilt a brand new reputation and working very hard to uphold, the risk there is far too great if we use the cascade rule and they all go down to lower levels.
Yeah, no, I hear that. You know what? Yeah, big shout out to Big T actually, who's texted us in saying, "I was wondering if you could help me out. I'm not too sure if I've been smoking too many frosty bars this past minute, but is it true that West Bromwich Albion are destroying Chelsea 3-0? With love from near the traffic lights, Big T. Full time. Yeah, the full time was 3-0 to West Bromwich Albion. ended down at the Hawthorns. Berahino scoring on 9 minutes and 47 minutes, and Chris Brunt scoring on 60 minutes. So it was West Brom Chelsea was 3-0 at full time. He's also asked if the right offer came in, would you sell Raheem Sterling? And that's from Big T. Yeah, because hold it. Ted DiBiase, that's the reference I'm looking for. The $1 million man.
Everybody has a price.
Money. Everybody has a price. It's one of them ones. And everybody has to pay the piper, but that's a different issue. But the fact of the matter is, every player has a price. If Sterling's not happy at Liverpool and wants to go, then fine. Like I've said before in terms of many players, and this is part of the reason why I don't get players' names on the back of my shirts. It's a case of players come and go. Some stay for a while. Some are flash in the pan. Some don't realize what they've got till it's gone. Torres. But anyway, it's one of them. But looking at it. But it is a case of I only want people at the club that I love and the club that I support that want to play for the badge. That's all I want. If you don't want to play, the door's that way. Don't let it hit you in the backside on the way out. That's all I'm saying. Ryan Sonley, you wanted to jump in on the Baxter, Livermore, and McCary.
I think they should be given at least. Hang on, let me just mute something else. I don't want that coming through on.
Yeah, but you got to get into it because we still got to move on.
Yeah, sorry, I just muted that. I want them to get quite a hefty fine and hefty bans because, they're footballers. They should know what's right and what's wrong. Because, I mean, look at Rio Ferdinand. He got banned for failing to turn up to a drug test, and he got 8 months.
I think it was 9. I think it was 9. Yeah.
And I mean, if he gets 8 months for that, 8-9 months, whatever for that, then what are they going to get? Are they going to get a year and a half, maybe 2, maybe even 3? What's your call?
That all depends.
I mean, if they positive to all of the drugs that they said they were taking, then ban them for 2.5 years from all football related.
But I mean, it's one of them. I mean, but as we said, there are kind of legal matters to do with it as well. I mean, it starts going. I mean, it all kind of starts starts up when, if the FA or the powers that be are going over the head of clubs and not giving them the chance to do something, then it opens up a lot of things legally.